All right, in the meantime here, we're not done, though, with this story. LiveNOW look there in the Los Angeles area over LAX at the moment here. Let's bring into the conversation one of our friends who've helped us make sense of this legal saga over the last couple of weeks. I'm talking about legal analyst Tre Lovell. He joins me. Tre, thanks for being with us here. And boy, what a really stunning turn of events. You and I talked about this possibility, I believe it was last week here, and now we're here. And I just got to ask, I mean, George Gascon, the district attorney, he can make this recommendation, but it's all up to a judge. You and I talked about that. What is the likelihood that whoever this judge is that is going to consider this recommendation will accept the recommendation? Are people being overly optimistic that a judge, when this is put before he or her, will green light it, will give it the okay?
I think there's a good chance the judge will accept the recommendation, and this is why. Gascon kind of punted a little bit here. The defense lawyers and the brothers were seeking resentencing and basically recalling the murder conviction down to a manslaughter. And if that happened, they would have already served their sentence and they'd be released immediately. Gascon wasn't requesting that. He wants to maintain the murder conviction, but under a separate law that allows for the possibility of parole if you were convicted, at an age younger than 26, and kind of give it in the hands of the parole board. So his office isn't agreeing to the release. They're just agreeing to resentence, and then if the judge adopts that, a parole board is ultimately going to be the arbiter on that. So it's a little bit interesting. But I think, the middle ground, the judge would probably go along with it, although judges can get tough.
Tre, I wanted to ask too, when you and I last spoke, I had acknowledged and noted that, at least publicly, it didn't seem like there had been any dissension from any corners about this possible review of the case. But George Gascon said as much in this press conference that there was, and it came from within his own office. What did you make of that?
That was really interesting. Usually you want to keep the internal workings of the district attorney's office within the internal workings. You don't want to publicize that. Everybody's going to have their own opinion. I think he said that to give himself a little bit of cover, to show what a difficult decision it was. A lot of people have different views on it. But I thought it was kind of striking that, he showed that there was, the mixture in there. It's going to be interesting because you're right. Other than one of the family members, I believe Mr. Anderson or so, coming out and not agreeing to the resentencing, it's been kind of a universal, in favor of allowing the brothers' release. But I do think it's going to matter politically, because some people are tired of the crime. Some people are tired of these anti-incarceration policies that Gascon has. And even though they're not saying it, I think a lot of people are going to be reticent about the release.
So, Tre, I wanted to ask too, I mean, if someone on the street stopped you and asked you about this story and asked you why Gascon is doing this, what is the kind of rationale that is underpinning all of this review here? Is it the fact that 30-plus years on, sexual abuse against young males is seen in an entirely new light? Is it the fact that sympathy has kind of soared for the Menendez brothers and their plight? Is it the fact that, yeah, they may have been model inmates throughout these 30-plus years? Which is it? Or is it a confluence of factors here? Is it the fact that their family has really been pushing for this? What is it?
Well, I do think it's a culmination of most of that. First of all, it's politics. We're talking 2 weeks before an election. The timing of this is not by coincidence. This could have been decided 6 months ago.
Okay.
So politics has kind of brought this anew. Plus, Gascon's office, the policies have been different. They are much more aggressive towards resentencing. They're anti-incarceration. They're more pro-rehabilitation. So this does fit within the policies, that the office are trying to promulgate.
But Tre, so we heard from Gascon on this. He was asked about that. That was a very contentious moment in the press conference here. He said his office has done 300 of these. How can this one specifically be political here? What did you make of that rebuttal to that question?
Well, yeah, he's done 300 of them, but he's publicized this one. He could have kept this one under wraps as well. which is how most of them are decided. Most of them you don't want to put, and get social pressure. You want the facts themselves to determine whether or not you're going to make the recommendation. He chose to publicize this. Now he said that he was getting a lot of calls and a lot of pressure from the public, and he wanted to address it. But in most situations, the district attorney is going to do these behind closed doors based on the evidence, and he could have done it that way as well. So I'm not totally buying that, but I do think he's sincere. I don't think this is just about politics. I think this really does fit with his social, desire, towards reform, towards change, certainly towards the penal system.
Yeah. I mean, Trey, there is a lot of hindsight is 2020 here going on with this story. The Associated Press has this line in their article. They say several family members have said that in today's world, which is more aware of the impact of sexual abuse, the brothers would not have been convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life. Obviously, it took 2 trials to get a conviction here, but do you buy that? Has the world changed that much? I mean, they admitted in court, in public testimony, they killed the parents.
I would tend to agree with that. I think the sentiment towards sexual abuse has changed. There's more of a sensitivity for it. Back then when the Menendez were convicted, during that time, a very popular defense was the battered women syndrome, when women would be battered and they would end up killing their husbands or the person perpetrating that, and they would use that as a defense towards intent. They said because it was more voluntary manslaughter, and as a matter of law, they said back then sexual abuse did not fit within that, and they couldn't use it as a defense. And even the prosecution back then said it doesn't matter. They could have been sexually abused. It's not a defense to murder. It's different now. We even have statutes on board that says if you have suffered sexual abuse, rape, things like that, that can be admissible. So there's a different sentiment now, a different sensitivity, and I wouldn't argue against that. But here's the problem: you can't use today's societal norms to determine what would happen back then. If that was the case, then we'd be revisiting every single trial that happened 30, 20 years ago. So you have to take it, at the time that it was rendered. So I don't really buy the argument that we would do it differently now. I mean, who cares?
Okay. All right, Tre Lovell, we're going to have to leave it at that. I think we'll be talking a lot in the next couple of weeks about this. We'll have to see whether or not this judge accepts this recommendation. That's the really next chink in the armor that Gascon has here. And so we'll just have to wait and see. Tre, thanks.
Thank you.